Dell Reitman. I'm the Director of Global Accounts at Zenoss. I am in sales, and you are all engineers, so you're going to have to hold off on all the hard questions. But I want to say a couple things. So first of all, thank you to my co-sponsors here. They're going to be doing most of the heavy lifting. We have Curtis Carrington from Cisco and Chris Freeman from NetApp. Zenoss is a hybrid IT monitoring platform. We started as an open source company based out of Austin, Texas back in 2006. We've matured, tremendously. One of the questions I had today is, why did you join Zenoss and why are you still there? So I can tell you I joined Zenoss because I saw an opportunity for myself personally to really interact with customers in a way that was going to change how they operate on a daily basis. So my previous background had been in business process analysis and enterprise architecture, which was always very forward-thinking. It was the plans about what we're going to do. With Zenoss, it was all about what's happening today, what's happening right now in our infrastructure, and where are we trying to go to. So yes, there's the planning part of it, but it really resonated with me. Why I've stayed is because I have such fantastic customers like Curtis and Chris and others who have really incorporated Zenoss across their enterprise to give them the visibility that they're looking for. So they get really actionable information from the tool, which helps them to make better decisions. Part of my job is supporting a lot of our federal customers, things where you cannot afford to have a system that's not operating. You can't afford to have a communication system down. The U.S. Air Force uses us for major missile systems. We're monitoring all of the sites where that information is coming in. To me, that's really important, no matter what my politics may be. It's really important that we're supporting that. And it's really important that we give them the information that they need to be able to take the right actions at the right moment, and we keep their systems healthy. I could go on, but I want to have the team that's here to speak about Zenoss and how they're using it, some of their ideas, and also we want to elicit a lot of your ideas. So what are the issues that you're facing? What are the challenges that you have as each of your organizations is implementing a hybrid IT solution, no matter whether you're working in Google Cloud or you're working in AWS or you have your own private cloud? How are you orchestrating all of this as you're making that transition? So that's the type of discussion I think we want to have tonight.
Absolutely.
Any questions for me? Okay.
All right, so who wants to start? Oh, sorry.
Who wants to start?
Okay.
Well done.
Thank tonight's venue sponsor, Dr. Warren Jasper, for having this great venue to host. Tonight's recordings and all our recordings are by Thomas B. Thomas. When we do hack nights, Cactus Group is actually very, giving us a space to hang it, do our hack nights in. We're thankful for them. TriLug, we are smiling. TriLug is now an Amazon Smile member. So while you're there, and if you put them in as your donation, a little slight percentage of that goes to the lug. And while you're there, you can get your TriLug T-shirts. They are available. And for community announcements, we have one now. Next month is usually our holiday gathering, potluck, and stuff where we kind of go. We don't have all the details on that yet. And as far as video location, it may be here, it may be in the annex in Red Hat. We're kind of working all that out. Anybody else have any other community announcements?
Yeah, I'd throw one out there real quick. If you've got people that you're around that are interested in getting into Linux but don't know how, we're going to start some hack nights in January teaching basic Linux. I mean command line starting with the LS command level Linux. For people, we found out recently we've had some people show up here to learn Linux and we were talking way over their head. So we're going to start a basic Linux course in January. There'll be more information coming out on Meetup soon, but if you've got people that are interested that need to get the basics in, please let them know and cue them into it, because I'd like to get as many people in that group as possible.
All Things Open was really fun this year, and I think it was TriLug that kind of encouraged me to go, and I highly recommend it to anyone in this room for next year.
Any other community announcements? All right. Have a job, need a job. Does anyone know of any open positions?
Really get to some of the new like AWS in the cloud environments. Okay, so monitoring, we're all about gathering data. Okay, obviously, you know, we get data, we try and evaluate it, we try and let people know when something's going wrong. But you know, the environment's changed. You know, things have gone from, you know, the mainframe where we had, you know, a bunch of apps on a single system. You know, and that was good, but it's kind of a waste of resources. We always tend to, you know, build bigger than what we need. You know, I think the example I like to use is that if an application says I need 24 gig of RAM on a system, well, okay, well let's pad that up to 32, just so it's a nice round number. And then you get it up to management to get it approved, and they're like, well, let's pad it again. Let's go to 48 just because. Okay, and then by the time it gets to procurement, they're like, well, it's cheaper to buy 232s, DIMMs, so let's go to 64. So you end up having a system with 64 gig of RAM, but you only really needed 20, 24, somewhere in there. So that costs, when you're talking from the business perspective, that's costing us money. Okay, the energy, the procurement, everything, you know, so how do we optimize that? And then we started going, you know, the whole industry started going into more of the lamp stack stuff, you know, one application per blade. You know, that helped a little bit, but it was still kind of a waste of energy, waste of resources. And then the idea kind of popped up. We really want to take resources and make them a commodity. We don't want to manage them, you know, we just want to commoditize it. And make it so that you're only going to use what you really need. Yeah? And, well, we're kind of there now. Microservices is a thing. We're spinning up, you know, Dockers with exactly what's needed for that service. Okay, but now that we're inside of the environment that we're so successful at getting to, we don't know necessarily how to get some of the traditional monitoring from it. You know, how do you talk to a Docker container that's only an index to the orchestrator? You know, so as monitoring goes, we've been struggling. That might be a strong word, but still, to keep up. Okay, it's hard to find these new data points to go and find the access into the box to get the data that we really need, so to be able to evaluate and give people an honest opinion on things. Okay, so it's always difficult to try and convince somebody, a server owner, a bank owner, an ESX owner, whatever, to say, well, can we try this? You know, and see what data we can get out of it. You know, so obviously some companies are better than others about providing APIs and whatnot, but it's difficult. And so some of the challenges that we're facing is some of the new technologies coming up are, you know, we have to go and infer data, you know, or we have to go and find an, you know, SNMP, WinRM, the traditional protocols don't always work now. So how do we get there? You know, and whose responsibility is it to find that data?
I would say, you know, like you said, you need the new data, and you find some way to get that data. You find the metric that's in your gadget. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a tool that helped you do that easily? This is the start of the commercial. We're going to kind of dovetail. I've got some slides.
Yeah,
all right.
Go on.
I'm going to take a trip in the Wayback Machine. I got like a time machine, and we'll jump back and forth a little if that's all right. So we know technology changes and accelerates. It's the subject of novels, movies, and streaming series. So it kind of touches on what Chris is talking about, is exactly that. We've moved from the device level monitoring into service level monitoring, or a different type of virtual elements. So it's a lot different. It's different metrics, and the need that we have is a type of tool and a process that changes with us over time. Let's see. There's a proverb that goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So the purpose of an NMS system is still the same. It's just the way that we do it is a little different. See if I've got it. There we go. So technology changes rapidly. I think everybody has maybe heard of 8-track. 8-track is kind of a joke these days, isn't it? But there's a direct line from the 8-track to listening to your music on a smartphone. Ethernet, about the time everybody got their house wired for Ethernet, is about the time wireless comes along. And for many years, we said, well, wireless will never compete with copper speeds. And guess what we have now is AC and other protocols that are coming along so that wireless competes with copper. So why would you bother drilling holes in the wall now? So this is a very different technology, and I just know something's just around the next corner. We've got SNMP that we've been using since apparently time immemorial. Buried in the sands of time. I don't know when the first SNMP RFC was. Was it in the 80s?
86 or 87, I forget.
So early as far as internet technologies goes, but SNMP I would say is long in the tooth. It's never been simple, and it's not really a lightweight protocol anymore. Those packets, you've got to go back and forth a whole bunch to actually get a lot of data. So most of our devices these days have APIs embedded. So the tool that we're talking about uses those APIs. I also put Moore's Law in here. I think everybody's familiar with Moore's Law, right? Anybody? No?
Oh yeah, I almost regret interrupting. But
No, I think we want to encourage
Has there
that.
really been any replacement for SNMP as far as you can tell? I mean, for a while they were talking about doing SIM, which was even thicker than SNMP.
Yes.
Yeah,
and then,
Pegasus.
what is it, Redfish, people are talking about, but most of the time I hear people just doing these APIs instead of some generic API.
There was a thing called Yang for a while, and there was NetConf, and these were attempts to try to get things into the device, like a cable modem with DOCSIS that would assist with the configuration. None of those caught on. I think it's because the vendors probably just didn't put the effort into those protocols. So it's going to be something that comes along, and probably out of the open source community, I think, that's going to, somebody somewhere is going to say, hey, why don't we do things this way, and sort of start their own RFC, and here's how we can implement this protocol.
Oh, you're right. SIM actually tried to do that, but in the early 2000s. I mean, Open Pegasus was on the mainframe, was on AIX, was on a lot of different platforms.
I haven't been watching so carefully, apparently nothing.
I know this isn't the right place to say it, but the only successful SIM implementation ever was WMI. Okay. Oh, sorry. That was the only successful one, and they've already gone beyond that into the WinRM spectrum. So yeah, it was what it was. It was a neat idea, but again, it's, you know, how do you find a good mechanism to get that data, something local to the system, without like a bunch of scripts running locally or whatnot. SNMP, as flawed as it was and still is, it's still there.
It's everywhere.
I've been mapping, but I didn't miss anything.
I was contributing to that back in 2002, the stack back then. Yeah.
Wow.
NetSNMP is still there, and still supported. So
Actually, I see some of the vendors' APIs replacing it eventually.
absolutely. And the reason that they're going into APIs is because of this exact problem that we're facing. How do we get data out of blobs? Okay, because that's all the Docker is to the OS. I mean, a container is to the OS. It's just a resource blob. How do you get to it? Without an API, without some, that's the easiest way, because they're controlling what data's in and out already. It's easier for a company, so, I mean, OpenShift is being actively developed still, and side by side is Prometheus, and that's about the only way to get data out of it. So, it's a problem. And everyone's still struggling with it.
So at the risk of repetition, but maybe for the fun of it, just looking a little more back here, that this is sort of things technology. And then there's also a shift of like the protocols that we use. I want to kind of show that. But also, whatever cool gadget or technology that you're walking around with now, within a few years, you're gonna look like somebody walking around with a cell phone the size of a milk jug.
I still have one of those in my garage.
So just imagine 5 to 10 years from now, somebody's gonna present something, there's gonna be a picture of, you know,
Old guys with beards.
old guys with beards, epic beards, I believe is the term my wife uses. She still flatters me. So for those maybe not as familiar with the concept of network management, so network management, getting the management information out of the device, kind of storing it. We have a purpose for that, and it ties to business purposes. So the FCAPS model is, I'm not sure who made that up. There's a Wikipedia on it if you want to look up FCAPS. But we're looking to get information around faults, the configuration of the device, the accounting, what the device is doing, the performance of the device, how well it's doing what it's supposed to do or how poorly. And then of course security. So FCAPS is this model. But what I call out over here, it's not ITIL, it's another business model like ITIL that focuses on assurance. So fault information is part of assurance. It's part of making sure the network works okay. And performance is the same thing. It's assurance type data. That's really where Zenoss shines, is in getting those two types of data together. You want to gather your fault data looking at link up, link down information, and you put that in a database. But over time, you want to look at the performance of that, so you collect a month of that statistic and see what's going up and down. And do you maybe, that's your utilization report, is we utilized X ports out of the total that we have. So then the same information that's collected for the fault actually becomes your performance data over time. Do we have other network management folks here, or is network management kind of a new concept? Kind of a new concept? Well, that's probably good.
For me, it's an old concept, because I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like you, I've been asleep for 15
Just like
years.
Cisco.
I'm stuck with the whole bucket,
So,
We all kind
I know, right?
if I could, I don't know, go sideways a little bit here, to ask you a question, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
No, don't.
About why did you first start using Zenoss? Why did that become an option in your universe?
To be very, very blunt, before I was working at NetApp, I worked at IBM. And for the last 10 years of my IBM career, I worked on a competitor of Zenoss. I was the primary remote developer for Tivoli. So, when NetApp had an opening, they got real cheap real quick and wanted someone around who could keep their current Tivoli instance running while we were deploying Zenoss at the same time. So I came in literally to keep that running for about that year time frame. Okay, I didn't do a very good job of it because they didn't do a very good job of implementing it. But you know, we moved on to Zenoss because that was the solution that leadership had tagged, saying this is better than what we have right now. Okay. Honestly, I argued with that quite a bit because I was more familiar with one. Now that I've had what, three plus years inside of Zenoss, just looking at the nuts and bolts, I will honestly say it's easier to do a lot of stuff in Zenoss simply because it's all Python based. You can absolutely take and transform the data as you need to on the fly. They have means to build up new and entertaining ways to go gather data or massage the data that you are getting. There's a lot of flexibility inside of that. Their API set has been growing very well. I'm using that right now to integrate between different subsystems throughout the environment. You know, the ServiceNows, the HPNAs, the various utilities, and so it's become an easy thing to use. Okay, just because it's out there, it's lightweight, and does what it needs to do for me.
That can be kind of deceptive.
It can be.
How like it seems lightweight, but it's profound what you can do. Like from the GUI, digging in to add a Python script to a template, and then persisting that data, and that just becomes part of this performance data that we're talking about.
The other thing is that because of their recent, the recent iteration of their software, they moved off of the traditional installable into a microservices stack. They literally are preaching, you know, doing what they preach, and so I'm sitting there working with Dockers every day. I'm working with individual containers. I'm working with the control center, the orchestrator, trying to, you know, and figuring out, you know, the little intricacies of it all the time. And that's a constant flow, and it's a constant thing, and that puts me in a position to understand some of the other things that, you know, our company is growing in directionally as well. So I think that just the combination of everything just kind of, you know, helps me grow, but also helps the company grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced something different but similar. So I came on board at Cisco in the TAC in 2000, and I joined the NMS team. At the time, I had been working on a platform that went and polled devices remotely and pulled information in and then created notifications based on people's whose names were in the SQL database at that particular time. We used ePage, we used quite a few things. But when I came to Cisco and started working, I started supporting Cisco Works, and I supported Prime Infrastructure and a few other things along the way. But the pain of our customers and the sort of rigidness of having that product, I just felt like there could always be something better. And a couple of years back, I changed roles and got to be a platform developer. So I got to choose what tools went in the platform. And someone said, hey, you should check out Zenoss. I'm like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
So I got my CentOS disk and learned a little bit about ESXi, and next thing you know, I've got this thing up and running, and the flexibility, the ability to go in and change things kind of on the fly, add a new protocol in the future if I need it. I'm going to talk later about a thing called Service Impact. That was really the hook for me. Service Impact winds up providing what management wants and what engineers need. It's the management view of the network, like, is the network doing the thing, which is really all the manager wants to know. And the other side of it is the guys who are running the network, are we at risk of something? You know, so if you've seen a normal NMS, it's a whole sea of red. You get 1,000 events because you get lots of data. So you're overwhelmed and you don't know which one to go look at. And that's, so for me, I see that value. And that's kind of, if you hear any passion in my voice and hear me ready to jump up and I sound like a Zenoss commercial, that's why. It was all at 16 years. Any Monty Python fans? Yeah, you remember Baron Munchausen? Remember the guy who had that ball and the chain, and he followed the Baron around until the very end, and they took the chain off, and then he was able to run around the world. That's kind of how I feel. So there's a little bit about me and why I got involved with Zenoss here.
Very cool.
Very cool. So in summary, kind of this slide before we move to the next, this data that this produces, NMS data is no longer a sideline activity of the business. It's core to what the business needs to take decisions, because the decisions are around, should we buy more servers, should we build our own data center, or should we go into the cloud? And most people wind up saying a little bit of all of the above. So I would propose that this tool helps us exactly do that. So
Monitoring in general helps do that.
yes.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, monitoring 15 years ago was a checkbox on the manager's list. That's all it was. Oh, we installed it. Good enough. A lot of the time, I mean, I can't tell you how many customer calls and field representations I had to go out to just because, you know, we didn't know how to do this, or we don't know what's going on. It's like, well, you go through the list and you see, and okay, well, you should have known about this because what you're monitoring isn't set up right. You're just checkboxing. So I think that's, and it's becoming a little bit, you know, more evolved now. You have to, monitoring is being recognized as a little bit more important because, you know, as he said, you can't have a server down anymore. You can't have a service down anymore. You got to be able to know when something is about to break. So it's very, very much becoming something that some upper leaders and stuff are starting to get wind of and saying, okay, well, what do we do about this? How do we know about this earlier? You know, do we have a response ready? That's the next logical step is, okay, we found something that's broke. How do we automate around that? You know, so it's very much an evolution that's happening, not only in what we're monitoring or how we're monitoring, but how monitoring is viewed, you know, and how it's used in industry. You know, it's becoming a valuable tool, and it's only going to continue to do so. You know, as long as we can start automating around stuff, we have to have the knowledge. So we got to open up those ports and get that data to be able to find the error, so we know what to fix. You know, so all right.
So jump
Oh
back.
yeah, jump.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I don't jump anymore. It sort of fits in with all of the dashboards that are so popular in the C-suite.
Very much so. They've gotten, I think maybe a little too popular. Those of us who are a little bit more gray around the edges don't delve into that C as quite as often.
Could you clarify what the C-suite is a little bit?
I'll let
you insist. All of the job titles that start with C. CEO, CIO, CFO, COO, CTO.
So,
I've never turned down tuning at all for those dashboards so that they didn't, you know, go red as fast as the ones that we had live or anything. I've never done that.
I think the running story has always been that managers, as long as you show them a pretty picture, they're fine. You know, so, you know, at any level, but they're getting better. They're becoming a bit more aware. You know, having helps.
Dragged kicking and screaming comes to mind.
Yes.
But you know, again, they want, managers are looking at the business, looking out there, worried about risk. They do want to know that the network is working because they've got some kind of boss, whether the boss is another C-level executive or the stockholders, shareholders, right?
Right. They have to, you know, report to the board and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's very much becoming a little bit more of an awareness pattern.
So if we can jump back in the time machine again to circa 1995. So typical NMS platform, at least one that I was working on. Okay, HP OpenView did all of the polling, just generic device polling. We're looking for link up, link down, a few things like that. Configuration polling. It's looking for things that go crazy. Nerve Center, we built a topology model in there. It was excruciating just to build a topology model for about 80 different servers that were in about as many different locations. We wanted to eliminate the case where the local gateway goes down, and then we get, for monitoring 80 devices, we suddenly get 80 red devices. Those devices aren't actually down. So we want to differentiate, when do we just sort of not know? And it was very difficult to do, so we had to combine these tools. But then for like the ISP link, we needed to know when that was saturated. So we used a tool that gave us more of that S&P information, Concord eHealth, to stitch all of these together. They went on a server with some Java components. So we had an MS SQL database that was like what time is it and whose job is it to respond, because I didn't want to respond. I mean, I did want to build the thing, but ePage and a few others. And I think that's a typical network management system, is comprised of a lot of different tools that are spread across the enterprise. To use a description from a friend of mine, most NMS is in a mess.
Right. Concord,
Yeah, I don't know. Are they still around?
Well, they were bought by CA Technologies in 2005, and Concord was, and then, on Monday, Broadcom bought CA.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
the place
so-
where software goes to die, Computer Associates, is going to die.
There it is. It's following the normal path. I
Wait,
think.
there was another purchase this past week?
Let's see, yeah, who were they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would this be?
Huh? Have you? No.
Oh, no.
31 billion,
I think
34 billion.
34 billion.
34 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, IBM bought Red Hat. For those of y'all who didn't catch that.
I'm putting my hands over here and saying, la, 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 I did not hear anything.
I know.
That's why I did when somebody said that.
Oh my God, I'm in the wrong room for that.
So,
Meetings will commence outside.
That's right.
So, anyway.
So this kind of platform, it's not really scalable. These are hardware tower servers that sit, maybe they sit in a rack, a compact DL80, to throw out a number from way back. So you see this platform, it performs the function that we need performed, but it's not really scalable. What?
400 eHealth servers,
Right.
you could pull the world.
But each of those servers is going to wind up with slack. It winds up with slack in the CPU, slack in the memory, slack on the disk. And that's really why the drive for virtualization today. So this management by devices, by building discrete devices and look for the green blinking lights, that's kind of...
Is that technical jargon?
Blinking light, they're blinking lights? Yes. Your blinking lights this is from an old Cisco commercial about the blinky thing. The guy in the data center is explaining to the boss that there's actually security in there. It's actually from a security thing. So I'm going to propose a new NMS platform. Yeah?
Propose it.
All right. So using Zenoss, you still wind up using 6 servers, but we're looking at a way to monitor the entire enterprise. Zenoss itself lives in Control Center, Resource Manager, and Analytics, so there's different servers. This is what uses Zookeeper and Docker to stitch those 4 servers together. It can be more than 4 based on demand. So as your network scales up, your network need scales up, you can add another resource manager to the pool and continue to march. To focus on a need for unified communications monitoring, there are 2 Insight servers. The Insight correlation server that talks directly to the UC servers to get perfmon data. And then once it's got it in there, the dashboard server just sort of presents that data. Hopefully we'll get to a view of that data a little bit later. But Insight was mentioned. That's Insight, right? Same guy? It's a different Insight. Oh, I'm disappointed.
Insight that I mentioned is a company based out of Phoenix, for those who are looking
Ah,
for
okay.
them. The Insight he's talking about is one of the modules that sits on top of our base products. Zenoss
Right.
Insight.
So it's from a company called Layer X.
It is from a company called
That
Layer
sort of
X, one
shows
of our
a lack
partners.
of insight on your part.
Yeah, it does.
Oh.
So what Insight will do is create those focused events, and then we get back into an event stream that's within Zenoss. So this is another view of them. I probably should have chosen something different here to show that these are virtual machines. They're still servers, but they're VMs. So there's a control center, resource manager, Insight, and there's your NOC user who looks at the different dashboards. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. They've changed, they're virtualized, they're scalable and flexible, but they stay the same because they still do the same thing. We need a full view of our monitored infrastructure. That's like all the devices, the ESXi, the UCS, or whatever. You know, I'm a Cisco guy, so I'm going to assume everybody uses UCS.
Sure.
Sure.
No, seriously.
But one thing that you'll notice out of the box with Zenoss and Resource Manager, and I may say it too often, there's a Zenpack for that. Because if there's not, you can make one. That's part of its flexibility, is the ability to add new device types, so you don't have to wait for the vendor. That was another of the pain points over the last, umpteen years that I worked in the TAC, was we were the vendor that the customers were having to wait on. Cisco Works would come out, and then it would be 6 months to a year before a device pack update. And believe me, I'm the support guy. I'm typing emails to the product manager, and so I felt the frustration as well. There were business reasons that happened, and they eventually fixed that, but it took a long time.
Just everybody that has, you're sitting, there's a card in front of you, so he's talking about those integration points onto other technologies. That card just describes some of the 400 that are automatically included with the product. Just wanted to, since it's in front of them.
Yep.
So AWS.
And I was going to say the Zenoss community. We actually use Zenoss at work at Bandwidth, and that's one of the things that I've asked a lot. I've been able to ask a lot of questions on there, and they have a lot of resources available on there. Some of the community users have more in-depth guides that are necessarily available, like the Zenpack SDK stuff. But one of the things I commonly tell people is that you can do everything. It may be a little bit steep learning curve, but you really can do all the
I
things.
should stay listening to Jane.
Yes, I've spoken with her a number of times.
Absolutely. Yeah, just as a reference point, if anyone's used Eclipse or any kind of a plug-in IDE, Zenpacks are like a jar file you plug in. I mean, that's literally all it is. But the amount of tooling that goes into a Zenpack can be something as simple as, oh, here's a set of MIPS, for you to just monitor this specific thing, storage. Or it could be as detailed as logging on to a bank of AIX boxes to go get, run scripts to do, explicit data gathering. So there's also all kinds of layers within that it can build graphs, it can build data reports. It's very cool. So, but that's their way to package things. Zenpack is a jar file.
So could a Zenpack be built that goes out and queries SOAP, REST APIs?
Absolutely.
You really can do like kind of anything.
It's all Python, so yeah. I mean, as long as you know what API you're talking to, you'll do it. Easy.
Absolutely, whatever protocol. Remember, these are servers that, well, if you do an on-prem build, you're going to choose CentOS or RHEL and get the RPMs and build this. And I've built this many times, and you get to have a process. But because you own the operating system underneath, if there's some new protocol that comes along, you go get the RPM for that protocol and install it, and then as soon as you can hand the data up, you can have the collector start polling that. So you just create a template that invokes whatever that is. If it's a Python interpreter or whatever it's going to be. So that's what I mean about extensibility. It's like as extensible as Linux is. So you guys are probably pretty familiar with that. Yeah. So mount new API. So let's see. I included a slide that talks. Doesn't really talk. It shows the name of a few of the open source projects that are intrinsic components of Zenoss. So as you're building it up, or as the system is booting up, really, Docker has to come up. Then Zookeeper does an election that helps with reliability. The HBase is a cluster of database servers that are waiting out there. OpenTSDB, it's used out at the collector to form a pipeline. So you could theoretically separate your collector machine from the rest of the things as long as you build this connection back. Of course, obviously, you're going to talk to Zenoss support. You're not going to be a cowboy and shoot from the hip.
I actually do that. I have a bank of five RM servers in the cluster, you know, for the thin pool there.
Yeah.
I have a primary, on the West Coast, we have a primary collector set that's 5 more in a pool. And I have one locally here that's another 4 in a pool. And then I have some DMZ servers, and I'm about to expand into Bangalore and APAC and EMEA. So collector sets, you know, just because you don't want SNMP over a 10 gig. That's stupid. So, yeah, it's...
Pull it every 100 milliseconds.
I know. Yes.
One thing about SNMP and polling, I don't know if I'll divert here for a moment. I had a customer once that wanted to poll every 500 milliseconds. And I didn't know if he wanted like a smooth curve. And of course, we get back with the business unit and the switch, and they're like, we don't update the statistics that fast. And I'm like, how often do you update the statistics? They're like 45 seconds. So you can poll every 10 seconds successfully, but it's not changing except once every 45 seconds. So the customer thinks the switch is broken. It's not broken. It's just, when you get to thinking about it, there are changes on the network. Humans need to become aware of those changes, but how fast are you actually going to take action? So once you see a trend line change, how quickly can you become aware of, oh, that trend line changed, I should do something about that? In my experience, it's actually kind of on the order of months. A lot of data centers.
It's almost Christmas, no worries.
I think Kibana and Logstash are actually related. There's other components, so it's really open source kind of throughout, top to bottom.
For clarification, are you saying that Zenoss can be deployed via Docker containers?
It is.
Yeah, it's in their control center. It's their own proprietary control center. It's not integrated with Kubernetes and stuff like that. Fine.
Yeah, control center is a Docker application.
Yes.
It's the orchestrator
no
that talks to Docker to spin up the containers holding all the services. Yeah. What's up, man?
You know if there are any plans to be able to deploy to Kubernetes, right? That would just eliminate the need for extra virtual machines.
That would be a takeaway.
That's
That
a
was
good
a great
takeaway.
takeaway question.
If I may, we've been evaluating our next farming platform, US Cloud, is one of the things we're kind of maybe looking at. And when I spoke with one of the salespeople, they said that right now there is no focus on that, just because they have, because when they started developing their Docker deployments, nobody else really had like a good implementation for it, so they've been focusing on the control center, their own proprietary.
Right, their orchestrator Service D is a RPM install. It actually predates Kubernetes. Okay, it's been there. They've been running containers for 3 years now, and solidly. So, and it's been working just fine. You know, so who the orchestration is really doesn't matter as much. Kubernetes is just, you know, flavor of the week, really. I mean, Google, but it's there's going to be a. I mean, these things are cyclical. Okay, there's going to be some sort of a winner eventually, and once that comes out, because there's about 4 or 5 different orchestrators right now that are kind of competing in that space, and once there is one, I'm sure people will, if they choose to, will go to that. Right now, I know a direction that they are going is out cloud-based, and including GCP. So they're actually pushing up where they don't need that. Logically, on an install locally, it'll be out in the cloud. So, and I think that GCP, is going to be kind of exclusive Kubernetes. So I think they may be there,
So
but that would be.
we have a Zen pack that monitors Kubernetes, but we're not built on Kubernetes.
Right.
We're built on the Google Cloud platform for our Zenoss Cloud product. And then you're speaking specifically to the on-premise
kind of weird. It's not normal. I think the future direction for Zenoss is for everything to be in the cloud. But having worked extensively with the support staff and the engineering department at Zenoss, they're very flexible and accommodating in, well, we're trying to do this thing. So as a vendor, Zenoss has not been like, well, we've defined it this way, and that's the way you got to do it. They're like, well, give that a try, and if you have trouble, we'll try to work through. And I haven't had any issues that I couldn't overcome yet. And I think we've had some substantial issues, but we've always overcome them.
I'll take it a step further. I've drank with most of the support staff.
So, there is that. So, good folks, top to bottom.
Oh yeah, Austin's a fun place. Perhaps. I mean, if I was behind the wheel, then maybe. But it wasn't, because it's Austin. Like bicycle brick shops. So listen. Anyway, go on.
So I didn't want to overload the slide deck and slow things down, so I apologize. I didn't include a lot of details that I normally would. I normally would include the infrastructure. The infrastructure is where you actually add all the devices, and it's where you can see the device classes. So this is just a basic dashboard. Like most NMS products, we're going to have an event stream. This one's over here on the left. There's other, you can place data points on here, and you can see their live kind of thing. There's a topology map. None of these are required. You can click X and get rid of everything, or build your own dashboards. Each of these dashboards is actually an API call into Zenoss itself. So if you don't want to use this, you can just stand up a Linux box and make your own API call, and then stick it right on there. You'll get JSON back, and so however you like rendering that. Again, to harp on a theme, it's all about flexibility. Once you have the devices that are brought in, this to me is really kind of the most exciting part of Zenoss. We've talked about the XenPaks. The XenPaks will bring a device in and implement a model. A model takes a device and breaks it up into elements. So now you've got a database full of a bunch of elements. And all of these things, whether it's a physical device or a virtual device, has all of these elements. So they're connected by that database. All the database tables have the connections inside, so the relationships are maintained. So when you decide to define a service, and when I'm talking about this, the easiest way I think to envision this is like an Apache D process, a VLAN that delivers that, and your ISP Ethernet interface. Let's say those three things at the top level. We're going to define that as a service. Any events that affect that are automatically correlated because the model exists. So you don't spend a bunch of time saying, well, what happens if I get a syslog message from this thing? It means this other thing over here. You don't build correlation. You avoid having to build it. So as a result, for that service, you can tell at any moment, is that service available? So can a customer make a phone call? Can a customer get a web page? Things like that. That's what I mean by management wants to know, does the thing do the thing? Technical term.
Jargon.
That's the one on the left. So at all times, we can see that our service is available. The dot on the right shows us that our service is degraded. There's something, we're at risk of losing our service, but it's still operational. So if you got 4 10 gig Ethernets and one of them goes down, you're 25% at risk for throughput. But not only do we know that we're 25% at risk for throughput, when we take a look at the service impact model, here nothing is wrong. Those two aren't related. I apologize for my slide deck. But imagine, if you would, that one of these was red. You can see below the red, everything's going to be green. So your eyes are instantly drawn to the part of the network and a particular component that has a problem. This, by the way, this visual representation is what goes out as an event. So in your event, you'll get some text that will tell you the name of the component and the percentage of confidence that that's the cause of your problem. And for an NMS, I mean, to me, obviously I'm very animated about that. Do you have more to add or questions?
I'm avoid service impact.
Oh, you're avoiding service impact.
I'm avoiding service impact.
So Chris has a problem I would call scale. Not like dragon scales or scale mail, but
I have problems with that too. It's different. But no, because of the size of my implementation, there's a couple of bugs that I recently found an impact and they're working on right now. But I had to actually back impact out of my environment for the time being until we find a solution to the size, to the scale issue.
So with my implementations, I have up to about 500 devices. So yeah, I know you're probably like laughing at me.
On the inside and the outside. It's amazing.
So 500 devices that are monitoring with Zenoss and about 40,000 endpoints for voice.
As opposed to what's your environment like?
I have network side is about 1,500 individual devices, not counting the UCS stuff.
Right.
Server-wise, I'm upwards of 7,000-ish. Okay, and then if I go into the UCS data points, I just actually had a calculation of my data points that Kyle did, like one of the support guys did a couple weeks ago. He said I was having, my HBase was large because I had 2.8 million data points inside of there.
Can you easily scale out? Can you scale out?
I can.
You can.
I can to a degree. Okay, it's interesting to scale out because you have to add disk to the pool and add resources to the pool to scale out. Okay, which is easy enough to do for Zenoss to do. It's a little bit more difficult for NetApp to do.
And we're trying to look for a more elegant way to handle the scalability versus having somebody have to keep in building. Right. Like moving to Google Cloud was part of that strategy to be able to help scale out.
Right. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Is that also, if you could estimate like the amount of time that like how much of the setup of the service impact infrastructure, you know, building that out, how much is that, like if you could estimate like percentage-wise, like how much of that is manual, how much of that is automatic?
So,
or is there like an initial learning curve? And
there would be an initial learning curve. You got to stumble through it a couple of times. You got to talk to the SE a few times, and then the light bulb goes on. This part here is all automated. This is when you bring the device in and the device is modeled. These connections are just in the system, so they're in the data. You can manually adjust those.
I'll expand on that. It depends on your data. Okay. Yeah, it does. So if your data relationships are already in your CMDB, and you have an integration between Zenoss and your CMDB, you can incorporate those relationships into your service impact, and it will build layers for you like this.
So,
you can do it manually.
Like I guess, do you have this primarily being driven by CMDB?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do personally.
We're just now kind of getting into that, so that's
right. Yeah. That's our big thing is trying to get that integration between your ITIL software and your monitoring software, so you have the right amount of data across the board. Getting, knowing where everything's at.
So if you have a CMDB, you're going to pull in the services that you've defined and all the CIs, and those relationships within Zenoss will be automatically known and discovered, and that model will be built. You have to identify your high-level service, whether you do that in a CMDB or directly within Zenoss. But then everything down below, that's all just because of the way we build out those integrations and the Z packs. We understand those relationships, the dependencies.
Yeah, there's some in the room who may not know what a CMDB is.
A configuration management database. It's basically a database that details your organizational chart, any applications that your organization uses, any servers that are owned by said applications, any services owned by said applications. are usually defined within a CMDB and then propagated out to the environment so that people can easily look up and define things against it. It's typically in some sort of an ITIL software package like a ServiceNow or a ManageNow or others. I don't know, I forgot what you're using.
We roll around.
Yeah, you roll.
It could be Sharewell, it could be Remedy, I mean.
Oh, yeah, Remedy,
We
yeah.
integrate with all of the major ticketing systems and CMDBs.
Right.
Can you create the entries like the devices, the thing needs to be monitored? Can you create that via REST API call?
I'm pretty sure it's possible. I haven't
Yes.
seen it yet.
By like adding a device and
Yeah.
triggering modeling for it, you can do that.
Oh, no, right. I'm doing that right now with
Full playbook?
no, actually, I'm doing it through a ServiceNow front end.
But I think you could, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've already written all the Python
Yeah.
API calls into
Yeah, the-
into building and subtracting.
Using the API is actually simple. We're on a very old, or an older version of it, and even then, it's fairly simple using
Yeah.
APIs to create.
As I said, their API has some very easy parts, as in they publish documentation for the easy stuff. It's the hard stuff that they don't publish very well.
That's a takeaway.
Yeah, I'll take that back.
Yeah. How do I get to host inside of vSphere?
So for the folks in the rest of the world that don't have a fully populated CMDB, it's fully functional, because I think the population of Fortune 1000 companies that actually have a working CMDB would be about 0.1% fully functional. And less than that, is moderately functional. So
Sounds like they need a better employee.
yeah, I know, right?
I'm saying.
So if you don't have that, how hard is that to achieve? Because you are now having to do the correlation, because it's not done somewhere else for you.
So the data entry into Zenoss can be done either on a single or a multiple. If you want to go through GUI, okay, you can, or you can script it up. If you have a list of servers, you can just go and API it through, roll through the list, easy enough. It's, again, all Python. You can populate the server list. You can populate the application list. Okay, creating the relationships is going to be a little bit more difficult. You got to go and actually drag things over and use the GUI tools to do it. But they do provide those tools to allow you to do that at least. You know.
Theoretically, go to a curl and a full loop, right? With the
Yeah.
REST API.
I mean, personally, I just write a Python script. Because, you know,
So you can use what you're familiar with.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the
Flexibility.
tomato, whatever, I'm still throwing it out.
So what happens when you have all these relationships built out and then something goes wrong?
When something goes wrong, out of here, we generate a notification, right? Yeah. We generate a notification into some type of ticketing system, typically with an NMS platform in general. So that's fairly easy to trigger and write our own little Python script.
Right.
We love our Python these days, don't we?
I'm saying.
And Perl, is actually one of the things I use, out of Zenoss to send over to our ticketing system.
Firefox use their developer tools all the time to see what the API is doing. So there. It's great. That's one of the big challenges that we have is like the waterfall effect. So say a switch goes down here, and suddenly all the devices underneath aren't talking to the network now. Do we want to send a ticket out for all of them? Well, yeah, we kind of do, but we kind of don't. Because really, it's not the device's fault they can't talk to the network, it's the switch's fault. So I usually blame Cisco, but that's beside me. So finding a way to really consolidate all that information and have it and minimize the effect that it's going to have on your operations team. You want to be as precise as you can be, to say, okay, here's really where the problem is. Yeah, all these devices aren't talking, but really it's because of this guy right here. And just getting that level of detail in that data and sending it to the right folks means your uptime is going to be less impacted because you're more detailed. I mean, you got the right data to the right person. As opposed to flooding the various, OS layer ops teams with a bunch of, the system's down, there's 150 of them. Of course there is, there's a switch down.
Yeah, an old term for that is event correlation. Yeah.
Right.
And these days, instead of correlation, I'd probably call it event suppression. So you have something that's an impactful event that seems to cause other corollary events that want to generate tickets. So you could probably, in this hierarchy, figure out an automated way when an event comes in to see something higher up. And so if you've got a higher up problem, suppress the notification for that. But out of the notifications impacting a particular service, each of the notifications would have a confidence score that comes with it, or an impact severity score. So between those two values, you could quickly see in the incoming tickets which one you need to shift to focus to. So,
How do you guys handle transient devices? Things that come and go automatically, such as like something in AWS auto scaling group or something. The data gets morphed in because
send them on their way. No.
I mean, because the data will be, it'll be created and essentially orphaned and then go stale because that system will never come back. Period. So how do you guys handle that kind of data issue?
That's a good question.
That's an interesting question. I haven't handled that. I work in a kind of a high security environment, so everything is controlled.
Right.
I don't do discovery and stuff like that. There's we've got Splunk and a SIEM that is stood up to watch for the presence of a new system and to take immediate action against that. So I'm not sure what we would do.
See, I'm more in the corporate environment, so we have actual access points out there for, phones and random laptops from customers coming down, to the EBC to look at our next biggest thing. And so when they connect and they go in, we just don't monitor them. So we know where those access points are, and we're just saying nope, and we're not even going to try and include them into our monitor set.
Okay.
Because if their device dies, they have their own support.
So you guys haven't dealt with the system where those devices have data you need to get that out of it.
So we do have similar items, where say if there's a refresh on a segment of the network and they update all the devices, but they change all the IPs and don't tell anybody. Heavens knows when that happens.
That's never happened before, has it?
No, never. About 4 hours ago.
Are you talking about like spinning up? I think he's talking about like spinning up like auto scaling stuff to spin up. And they do have an AWS Zen pack that you can have it like at whatever poll interval it can go and create those devices for you in Zenoss. Now what happens that data after those disappear is kind of
for our setup personally, we don't have discovery coming from Zenoss proper. We have our discovery inside of CMDB, inside of our ServiceNow instance. When it discovers there and creates the CI inside of the CMDB, then every so often we pull CMDB to see if there's anything new, and then we'll sock it in. Okay, so we'll auto-create devices off of the CMDB discovery in ServiceNow. But that's it depends on whether that actually happens or not. Typically, we're only going to be looking for new servers, new services, something owned by one of the applications that we define.
There's just an impact to that.
No. So there's different protocols that Zenoss will use to go gather data. SMP being the primary one for pretty much everything. Outside of old Unixes, like Solaris 90 before AIX, we'll SSH into those, run a few scripts, run a few commands, and get the data back. But primarily it's pretty much SMP and WinRM and a little bit of API work on the side, depending on whether it's available on the device. We just opened up a whole bunch of Nexus 9Ks and API'd on that, the NX API. That's getting a metric ton of data.
So if the API is documented in the Zenpack, it's really good. I remember, I believe it was 2 years ago when I pulled the thing out of the box, and by golly, there was a NetApp, and everybody was like, how are we going to manage the NetApp? And I put an IP address in, and whoop, there it all was. It's like, well, there's all the disks, there's all the VMs, here's the LUNs and everything.
Yep.
It's like everything that ONTAP would give you is right there through the API. Now that's because some good-hearted people at the vendor, NetApp, took the time to build all of that stuff in the ZenPack. So then I had a good out-of-the-box experience where, wow, there was that. Well, let me go see about ESX. Can we get ESXi? And then in one tool, in one view, I've got the whole stack from UCS all the way up, UCS, storage, everything, because that had been a big concern for the platform guys, was like, how are we going to manage storage and manage route switch?
Well, you have 4 monitors under there.
More monitors, more tools.
And we just built our ZenPack for SolidFire.
Pardon?
We just built our ZenPack for SolidFire. The new flash arrays.
Oh.
One of the things I was going to say is, if you look at who some of Zenoss customers are, they are large technology companies. They are the Cisco's, the NetApps, the Junipers, the Nutanix, that list goes deep. And what happens is we work very closely with these organizations in our labs so that as they're bringing new products to the marketplace, we're able to monitor them. So we're keeping up with them, because they're not only a partner from a technology perspective, they're also our customer. So you can imagine that we have a really close working partnership relationship, customer relationship with them, and that's what's valuable to all of you, because then it's just made available as part of our platform. That's important.
Right on.
So are concerts.
So are concerts.
So
I'm dreading the next slide.
I'll do it. Do it again. You got this.
So that's a good segue, right? It's kind of an eye chart, and I apologize for that. I didn't get a graphic in here. The point is that through a cycle, once you have implemented and you're in operations, and some new unforeseen type of event happens, and there's not a metric for it or anything, but you figure out you can write this script that goes and looks for the way how we're going to know in the future. What I wanted to say was that's a short cycle. That's a short cycle with Zenoss to say, oh crap, we didn't know to monitor for this thing. So in a few weeks' time, I guess, in a normal Scrum cycle, sprint.
We get like about 2 weeks is the normal sprint, but it depends on the company and what methodology they're on.
Right. So in a typical sprint, if you're using the agile methodology, that should be enough time to recognize, figure it out, test it in QA, and roll it out into production, and then you can have a little bit more confidence that you're not at the mercy of a slow acting vendor. You can really take your network in your own hands. So thanks for bearing with me and not throwing zebras at me or coffee cups. I don't know. All right. Maybe, I wonder how much those are worth on eBay.
Take a picture.
So here, don't throw the zennies. Unless, well, I guess we'd have a collection of zennies.
Look at the movies. Okay.
So here I've created a bunch of slides and shown up at a Linux user group, and my Linux monitoring slide is text only. So monitor by either SMP or SSH. I think we were talking about that, right? Out of the box, there's 2 device classes for monitoring Linux. It's SSH. And yes, but simply not my problem. A friend of mine used to say. Both of these work. I think it's SSH is the preferred one, isn't it?
I think so.
It's
Well, it's secure, but one of the first
right. Well, if you use SMP v3, you can get AES, I think 256.
Yeah, I think
Using the implementation.
I think they have implemented that in the NetSMP stack at this point.
That's right. NetSMP was the
right. Right, that was it.
Yeah, that S&P was the one, like, they never came up with an AS256.
Right. I think I implemented those 3 in what, was it 2007? 6, 7, somewhere around there?
It's been around a while.
Yeah. Something like that. I updated the V3 stack for all the 120.
V6 has been around a while.
Years ago. Oh God.
So, I don't really have anything specific to say about Linux monitoring. It's, you add your Linux servers, it gives you all the things that you want to look at. You know, whether it's looking at the CPUs, it's kind of like looking at top, you know, but other stuff as well.
Linux is actually one of the easier ones to monitor just because everything's very straightforward, and you know, it grew up in as an engineering platform. I mean, aside from, you know, the early adopters who tried to make it to a desktop of choice, you know, it's really, you know, latched on as kind of the premier enterprise operating system. So it's everywhere, and it's built to be everywhere, and it's built to talk to everything. So it's very, very simple to talk to. Either which way, doesn't really matter. You're going to get the same data points, and it's all very, very straightforward.
As far as the SSH is concerned, that's been my primary method, primarily because S&P, if you're doing process set monitoring with these applications out there that are running in Java, the process string, I think it's a 128 character limit on the process software run path and name, and we found a couple of them that, like, hey, like, we didn't want to monitor all the Java ones, but like the particular parameter is pushed way far off and it's past that 128 character limit, so SSH there is no such limit.
Is it like out of the host resources bin or something?
Yeah, it's, yes, as HR, SW, run name, and run path.
Yeah. Those things, yeah, they can be monsters.
huge.
So, yeah, I've been in there quite a bit, but yeah, it's there are some obvious discrepancies between the two that it's just a flavor choice sometimes. Other times it is just limitations within it. S&P, for all its value to us right now, it's still just a 32-bit application running in a 64-bit world. So it has some limitations, and will continue to have limitations until they upgrade it.
Yeah, it's not simple host management protocol, it's simple network management protocol.
True that.
So, exactly.
And I don't think there's any draft RFCs for S&P v4. You know, I think.
If anything, they just go to a 64-bit, recompile it in 64-bit, but I don't think there's even ways to even think about that at this point.
So interfaces, 64-bit. What used to be RFC 1213 is the interfaces. There's a few specific ones.
They put it's not actually 64-bit. They put a conversion module in to be able to convert that 64-bit into something 32-bit will understand.
So it's a data.
I did not know that.
It's,
The HC, the HC,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that would impact MIB load ordering. So you need to make sure you load the MIB that defines that data type before you load a MIB that uses that data type. That used to be a common problem with S&P, is people would just load the thing that they wanted first, and then they didn't realize they had to load another thing. And once it's sitting out there in the memory, it's like you gotta somehow get it out of there and then reorder the MIBs. Sorry for the
technical jargon.
Yeah. So,
we don't like phones.
I guess we can quickly say a little bit about UC monitoring. I don't want to go as deep here. Me not being a voice CCIE, I couldn't anyway. But using the Insight data, we get a lot of good dashboards. When I show this to voice CCIEs, they get very excited because it's got all of the data on one page that you would normally have to go to multiple tools to see. I think that's probably thematic here that we've been talking about is that very thing, is showing the data that you need using fewer screens and fewer tools. So I think that's the last slide here. As you can see, Zenny comes from a proverb in Africa, and it's part of the Zenoss corporate culture. They say, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I heard that recently. I really, really like that. So what else?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the card and going, Zenoss for service management. Is there a ZenPax for Cloudify and OpenStack?
There is a Zenpack for OpenStack, and I'd have to check on Cloudify.
I don't know how to Cloudify.
I don't
We
know
use
that one.
OpenStack.
Yeah. Cloudify is a Tosca orchestrator, if you know what Tosca is.
Right. I've heard of it. I don't know if there's a Zenpack.
I don't know.
I don't think there is. There's the website. I don't have one for
I can look.
Yeah, someone with a laptop
Yeah.
might be able to
Yeah.
find it a lot easier than me right now. My phone's limited.
All of them all of our Zenpacks are listed with all the documentation about what they particularly monitor, so you can see every bit of detail about it.
So like what syslog messages, what traps they receive, if they use a script, the name of the script, that's typically included in there. You can actually open the Zenpack and look at it and see what objects are in there. If you need to, you can edit it and change it. That's also thematic, top to bottom. You can edit it, you can change it, make it your own.
I did have a question as far as y'all's for the combined venturing or like the event console in general. I'm familiar with the application where that's how they do the event correlation. Is they take a couple different things, pipe them together, and that is a fingerprint for the event. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, one thing that I've been kind of struggling with is trying to they have there's the first scene, last scene, and the counts, and you don't really know when those came in. Have y'all found any way to get that information from like ZenDS or from like the SQL or anything like that? Or has that been something y'all have keyed on or anything?
I haven't. I know that there's each time the counter is implemented up, that there is a log written inside of DMD so that you can go in there and actually look.
To see like what the
I
interval
haven't
was.
actually tried it.
Okay.
I just went through went to their conference over the past summer, and there was a large API course, and I was going through and we were digging through the DMD left and right. And that was one of the things that they spotlighted, was that there is a lot of the inference data and direct data is there for just about every kind of event.
Okay.
Okay. I check out the JSON 620 API page. They have a lot of samples, and I think there's a GitHub out there that has samples as well.
But do you know,
That
is it
is
possible?
specific to the event.
Okay. Is it possible that maybe like later versions of Zenoss? Or we're on Zenoss 4 right now, so we're
For
pretty
Z4, yes, there would be. There's an earlier API for
Yes.
Z4.
I do have that.
That's more of the inline stuff where you're like sourcing out the JSON first and then running it right from the inline. Yeah, I think it's still there.
Okay.
I know some of the big routers were there already in 4, so whether or not they're still.
They do have the events router.
If the events router is there, I'd just play around with that and carefully poke around the DMD.
I want to say
Emphasis
analytics
on
as well.
carefully.
Analytics will export the same information, and I'm trying to remember Paul's class a couple of months back. I believe that we actually did this, looked at the events so that you could see and change the timeline so that you could see the intensity of events. Because yes, if you just use the sort of dashboard, or rather that's is that in the
It's the
infrastructure
event
view?
console, I think. That's the only.
The event console, yeah. So it's in the event console. It summarizes things really good for an event console, but it's just those 3 data elements.
When you need to dig into it, it's kind of
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's also some issues with the fingerprints. And I know the NetApp Zenpack actually does some overwriting of the summaries and stuff, which is one of those things that makes me seems like maybe there is, but it's
I think there
difficult
is.
to
There
get.
definitely
There
is.
is, yeah, yeah. And I think analytics is one way to pull all that information out as well.
That might be a little safer. DMD is a tough one.
I spent a lot of time with this NDMD, very carefully. Broke things more than once though.
Yeah.
So the analytics is the reporting engine, and every data point, almost every data point that's collected can be just pulled out. And all that data can be streamed to some BI tool if you're using it. Many of our customers just use another tool, and they're just pulling all that information and then creating the reports that they want for everybody else.
So it's a big old Maria DB, and anytime you want to add disk space, you can just make your analytics server bigger and bigger and bigger. So
Maria 4. It was Maria 4 still, right?
I don't actually know. I've not gotten quite that far.
I thought they moved to Maria in 5, and they were on, what was it before?
SQL, MySQL.
Yeah, Zenoss 4 is using MySQL. Yeah, sorry, that's what I was.
But now it's
Maria.
Maria.
So yeah, they're using MySQL.
Gotcha.
yeah, so it's just this one, and again, you build the server, and there's this impact to attach the control center to analytics, and exports the data, and that's where you can tune up a lot of things.
Impacts a lot of ETL services.
So, what else?
Any other questions?
So I found it interesting because that weather maps are in the middle of here.
Oh. Since the networks I work on are disconnected by nature, I go ahead and delete that as soon as it's out of the box. It's actually in our baseline config that's dropped out because it won't be connecting.
Well, actually, it's like it's a get call to Google Maps, so it's kind of expensive as well. So I get rid of it too.
Yeah, what license is Zenoss license under? Well, I guess backing up is the open source.
There's an open source version called Zenoss Core, and then there's the commercial version that they've been talking about, and that's licensed based on a yearly subscription and the number of devices that you have within your environment. So physical, virtual.
What's the open source license?
The open source license is just an open source supported by community. There's nothing.
Oh, you've got the
GPL or L2 or.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the licensing per monitored point, is it in packages or per?
It's per. So it's per physical server, per virtual, per VM, per AWS, per storage.
Or like tiers, or you just count exactly?
So they're yeah, it's
Yes. The
we
answer
count,
is yes.
count exactly. we do define it pretty, so we can, when we do a report, when we work with an existing customer, we'll see a report of everything that's in their environment that they're monitoring and pretty much how many of each of them. So we can tell how many storage containers you have, how many VMs you have, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So,
I
but,
meant to make that
we
point.
never turn somebody off because they're, they bought 1,000 and now they're at 1,005 because they spun 5 VMs up. And that's just, that's not how we do business.
Yeah, as you know, some organizations don't like that pricing model. They'd rather buy a set package of,
Well, they
number
could.
of
I mean, they
hosts.
could buy. We're trying. So you could buy. Say, I think I'm going to have 1,500, and buy that capacity. I mean, my Air Force customer bought capacity, so they don't have to come back and buy again, and they renew that capacity on a contractual basis. That way, they don't have to worry about being 10 below or 10 above.
And that's all right. It is. I think we have a capacity, and we think we're going to have this many.
Right.
And I think we go over a little bit, but
It's more of how the organization budgets.
Right. It is.
Yeah.
And we can
You're
massage
flexible.
that however you need it to be done.
Which is true in all sales, by the way,
Thank you.
I just had a bad experience trying to buy OpenView years ago.
Oh. Yeah.
Mine open.
We help many customers move away from what I'll say the legacy vendors. People, I don't know who everybody's from, and be careful what I say here, but yeah, where they've struggled with license agreements, and so that's partly why we try to make it something that you know pretty much on a yearly basis what your expense is going to be. You're not going to get hit with a big bill at the end of the year. You have a plan for this many devices, you know, and we always encourage you to plan for your growth, so get that capacity, and then that'll be your yearly renewal. And that yearly renewal, it's the usage of the product, support, and maintenance. So it's one cost, and you renew that every year. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for
Yes.
coming.
By the way, you're wrapped.
Bill, before you shut up,
Yes.
remind me.
You have business cards, you have cards for our website. Card? Don't. Okay.